Thank you, Patty. Really appreciate it for really engaging the community. This particular topic is probably the most dearest and nearest to me because after watching some of the AI movies lately, one of the things that I know that the human rights is the one which is getting impacted through the biases. So what we want to really take today is go through a conversation which really figures out how we need to think about AI innovation. So as we know, the AI and the climate change has been the area that has been gaining a lot of traction in the recent years. So for today's cloud age of the digital technology drives the remarkable advancement at a phenomenal speed. In the areas such as healthcare, agriculture, schooling, and transportation, AI would enable the humans to leverage the vast quantities of data and also make groundbreaking advances. We are also seeing how the AI enhancing computing can also enable physicians to eliminate medical errors, increase yields for the growers, tailor training for the students, and also unlocate researchers. So this plenary session will examine how the AI innovation can help us achieve the UN SDG goals and also the potential ethical issues that is likely to bring forward their impact on economic equity and access for women. So the development of the AI is expected in many capacities and to be truly transformative, but as with great power comes great responsibility. So therefore, it's very important that we shift our focus from the functional capabilities to the ethics and governance behind creating such a powerful and potentially a consequential innovation. And like with that, many components of the technology industry, many of the barriers created by the AI is disproportionately impacting women. So with the latest a report published by Hill, so it says is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistic, women have been disproportionately financially affected by the COVID pandemic, accounting for the 54.5% of the overall net loss since Feb. So this has this has left roughly around 2.2 million women employed. So the move towards the AI transformation is also going to create additional job concerns about the labor displacements for women. And coupled with the pandemic loss, it could leave millions of women unemployed. So it is really our responsibility to look at this particular technology at a deeper level. So the survey of also there was a survey that was done with the financial companies in Feb and March of 2021 and found that 80% of the respondents say that they had a significantly difficult in getting other senior executives to even consider and prioritize ethical AI usage practices. Similarly, more than 65% of their enterprise had ineffective processes in place to make that all the AI projects compile to those regulations, and nearly half of these processes were ineffective. So what we want to do is, we know that the bias is coming in. We know that there's a lot of disruption going in. So today, what I would like to take you through is an insightful conversation with our industry leaders, Manasa Hari from JP Morgan Chase, Priyansha Bagaria, and Matt Jackson from Insight. So I would love all three of you to join me on the stage. And after this conversation, we will go into a roundtable where you can go and give your thoughts and insights so we can prepare a report from our community. So welcome, Matt. Welcome, Mansa. How are you today?
Great, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So before we get started, I will start with you, Manasa, and you are really passionate about this topic. I want you to go introduce yourself and share something, share what's something that you would change if you ran the world. I want to hear that.
Sounds good. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Chaitra. This is, first off, congratulations on this amazing event. It's much needed for today's world. For everybody, my name is Manasa Hari. I am head of product in JP Morgan and Chase. I'm building tools and services for JP Morgan community to move or access their data from a centralized environment. So I deeply partner with all the AI ML technologies within the firm. And prior to JP Morgan, I was at Teradata leading the AI ML platform at Teradata as well. So to answer Chai's question, if I ran the world, something that comes to my mind is I would unify all the continents, all the countries as an extension of each other. So that way there is one religion, one race, one nation. So everybody treats everybody equally, respectfully, without any discrimination. So that is something that I would think.
I am with you, Mansa, because after the COVID, going to any other country has been very difficult. Even just traveling to Canada, which is Vancouver, is just 1.5 hours from my place. I have to go through all these tests. I'm not happy about going through the border. So I love that. And I will vote for you if you become the president of US. Okay. So Matt, coming to you, tell me about yourself and share what's something you would change if you ran the world.
Great. Well, thank you for having me here. Really honored to be part of this forum today. I lead digital innovation for Insight. So we help clients through their digital transformation journey. So a lot of cloud modernization, data and AI, application innovation, really helping them transform, especially over the last couple of years with all the disruption in the various markets. For me, I think climate change is just an existential threat. And so if I could do one thing, probably accelerate the move from carbon technology over to renewables.
Thank you, Matt. We do need that one for sure. I completely agree with you on that. I've one of the bill that passed in Washington State is no styrofoam by Senator Mona Das, and I can't tell you how excited I am because we can go to the restaurant and we can say you can remove that styrofoam, give us in a proper boxes. So I love that kind of changes that's happening. Priyansha, talk about yourself. And she is our portfolio company, part of the cohort. So welcome, Priyansha. Introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Shai, and thank you for doing this every time, creating economic opportunities for entrepreneurs like me and supporting us in every possible way. So can't thank you enough for uh, having all of us as a part of WIC family. Hi, I'm Priyansha Bugadia, founder and CEO of Looper. Looper is basically a platform for data labeling and turnkey AI models, which enables retailers to increase revenue, manufacturers to reduce costs by automating defect detection, and also, as Chai mentioned, healthcare by providing more accurate, diagnosis, and many more across industries. In terms of one thing, that I could change if I run the world would be what WIC also strongly believes in is creating equal economic opportunities for men and women across the world, and thereby making a safer place for everybody, children, women, all around. So yeah, that is one thing I would love to do.
I love it. So if you guys are running for becoming a president, you have my vote. And I think all the WIC community has a vote for you. Do you all agree? Give me a thumbs up if you agree with that. There you go. Oh, there you go. So you can run for it. So Mansa, coming to AI stuff, you are working a lot with data. You're working with a lot of the AI work in JP Morgan Chase. Tell us about what AI-driven transformation truly means. So we need the definition, and then why we should start paying attention. Each one of us have to start paying attention. Go ahead, tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so Chai, I think that's a great question. So one, and my perspective is that the big data, the AI ML, this is not a new concept. This has been there for years now. And what we are noting today is the ability to look into richer methodologies, for industries or businesses to predict and prescribe information that can give humankind a competitive edge that they did not have before. So the new benefits, as we are seeing, Chai, today, with all the AI-driven transformation, which is much more beneficial for the businesses, bring in low-cost aspects for the businesses, delivering results and in much more efficient and agile ways that we hadn't seen before in the big data world. So as much as the applying this machine learning or AI technologies, we are witnessing a lot of usefulness that it brings to the table. Why we need to pay more attention right now is we need to understand, just not how AI can enable mankind to adapt new challenges, unlock a lot of plans for the future, but also how AI, one unforeseen fact about AI on machine learning is how likely it is to bring potential ethical issues with challenges in leading to opportunities around, regulations, the governance, and specifically how, Priyansha explained and yourself are explaining about how it actually brings about challenges in economic inequities as well. So I think it brings in much more emphasis at this point in time that we need to pay more attention.
Absolutely, Mans, I totally agree with you. And Priyansha, you talked about like the economic development and equity and access. And AI will power that. Either it'll take it away or it'll create access. And we have seen that in recruitment scenarios. We have seen them in social programs where some people are ready to get it and some. So what should we be thinking about when exploring the AI to drive economic access and also the advancement of women? And are there any specific best practices and procedures that should be surrounding the development and use of AI?
Great question, Chai. Thank you. Just to highlight with what Manasa started with saying, the readiness that enterprises are having towards AI, that basically has opened a whole world of opportunities for women across the spectrum. First, we should encourage more and more women to take up STEM education to join the workforce as data engineers, data scientists. For the women with limited education and location constraint, can work on low hanging part of AI model, that is the data labeling part of building AI models by getting right access to certifications and training programs. And something which I believe in implementing it with my own company Looper, we have basically hired and trained young women annotators from small town in India who have been deprived of social and economic opportunities. We have designed an in-house training program for them, which includes onboarding to the platform, having sessions with our data scientists or understanding the customer use case, and then going through review sessions with the team at every step, making sure we maintain highest quality label data. Our hope is to provide them financial independence and facilitate their entry into the skilled computer workforce. We believe by empowering one woman, we are uplifting the entire household. And also, one last thought on this would be to also, like me, there are so many female women entrepreneurs we have it through Wig Network, who who have some amazing products that they have developed on AI. So I would really like to that each one of us, if we can support them in some way to get access to these economic opportunities across, that'll be great too.
Yeah, and Priyansha, I love that because, I recently went to India and I spent some time with talking to a few people there. Access to the AI technology is also very hard, right? So as the kind of things that the entrepreneurs are doing in partnership with the corporation is the only way we can unlock those access. Otherwise, it's not possible. Universities cannot do it, the governments cannot do it, but the corporation and entrepreneurs can come together to really create that economic opportunity. Very well done. I'm so proud of what you're doing for creating access. So Matt, coming to you, the current landscape with the job market, tell us what's happening and what are you seeing from a corporate perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody's aware of the impact that the pandemic's had over the last 18 months. And unfortunately, I think it hasn't necessarily hit everybody evenly. It's created more inequities in the market. For people that might be in retail or service, education, healthcare, happen to be a lot of traditionally women-dominated industries as well. It's created hazards in those workplaces, whether it's job loss or just a more dangerous workplace that has potentially forced people, out of that industry. At the same time, a lot of us in the technology sector, we can work from home. We're kind of in a privileged environment where we can maybe even be more productive, right? Have more benefits and have more resources flow our way. And so inequities that pre-existed the pandemic have gotten significantly worse. I think when you add AI into that conversation too, what's happened is, AI in a perfect environment is used to make humans more productive, right? More effective, create new opportunities for people that benefit both, the organizations that they work for, as well as the consumers and beneficiaries of those organizations. But what's happened in the last couple of years is that AI has been used to automate jobs, right? So where companies couldn't find a workforce, they automated it. And so whether that's, again, in that service sector or even within IT, I think it's been a net loss to job opportunities, right? Rather than a benefit to all the constituents in the market. So just have to be watchful over the next few years as we continue to adapt AI into this workplace to make it better for people as opposed to eliminating the need for them.
Sure. And Matt, can you go a little bit deeper on this one? Is where do we see that kind of a job impact? Because when we were having a conversation, you talked about healthcare and, social. Can you go a little bit deeper where we should be all looking for those kind of changes that are happening that may stop access for women, especially economic access for women?
Yeah, well, I think it's because of the inequities that have been created. You have to do deep dive into, what opportunities exist within a specific industry or specific sector, and then what can be done, to maybe prop up opportunities or create new opportunities for folks. So what we've seen in particular, I just talked to an analyst company today around, like, manufacturing is a great example where, there's been a long conversation about, offshore and onshore and moving of manufacturing. The disruption in the supply chain, has caused chaos across the world. And so, how can we think about that and create more resiliency? Those are going to create more opportunities for people, so that if we can invest our efforts and our technology in creating more sustainable workplaces, right, that creates opportunities for people. It results in economic growth, which creates opportunities for all. Whereas I think a lot of people look at it from a corporate perspective and say, hey, how can I use this technology to reduce cost, to create more efficiencies, right? And that has the net effect of eliminating opportunities for folks. So I don't think there's a blanket answer. I think you have to look at the nature of the industry. If there's one thing you can look at a positive technology like education space, having technology enable students to be able to participate remotely. It's not the same experience, but it did allow some continuity. That can't be said about retail sector, right? And so you have to look at it. It's not a simple one size fits all, but I think if you deep dive into those different industries, you can understand how to apply technology for good, how to apply AI for good, so that it benefits people and creates more opportunities for employment in those sectors, independent of gender. But in particular, like we mentioned, I think traditionally women-led industries have been disproportionately impacted by this.
Sure, Matt, completely in alignment with you. For me, I love AI because it removes that manual work and then helps us automate a lot of the things. So for me personally, I love the technology, right? It's more like a mobile phone. When you had it, it has the pros and cons of it, but I want to look at the pro and really look at what it can change my life. And it has changed my life. So we know that one is happening. But we are seeing that the jobs are going to be impacted because women do have those repetitive jobs that they do keep. So Mansa, this is for you, is knowing what we are looking at the job market, does the AI make it even harder for women to get into the tech industry, or it will make it easier to get in the tech industry? What is your perspective on it?
Yeah, so Chai, just following the thought process here from where Matt was saying, and how you were saying that AI brings in a lot of good things. Like, we have a lot of companies today who are pioneers in AI ML, and they are going fast in building all of these technologies. And they all say that every aspect of our life will be soon transformed with AI and machine learning, through innovations like self-driving cars or facial recognition applications. But the people whose life is like underpinning that vision actually do not gain so much from this transformation, is what we are talking about right now. So there was a research conducted by a Montreal startup. Their name is Element AI, and they try to estimate on how much of diversity is there leading the machine learning aspects, and how much of women contributors are we seeing. And it was found out that among the entire landscape, there were just 12% of women who actually contributed to the machine learning objectives or submitted their research material. So I personally feel that we have much more of a scientific responsibility to act in this particular field than other fields, because we're all developing a technology that affects a large proportion of the population, right? So one thing, alluding to what Matt was trying to say, was AI is not actually taking away the jobs. It's actually creating more jobs. It's not a job killer. But like how Priyansha and Matt put it, it is more of a job category killer in some sense. So a lot of women actually are employed in retail, professional services, customer services organizations, and a lot of these jobs are where AI and ML is actually, getting into these spaces to automate or augment a lot of these capabilities. So another research that actually speaks about it is the whole International Monetary Fund that I had read, which actually said that 11% of the jobs currently held by women in these areas are at risk of elimination because of this categorical specification in the digital technologies that's taking over the jobs. And it is also projected that 70% or higher probability of all of this automation results in around like 180 to 190 million of jobs eliminated over the next 20 years. So I feel that it's definitely a responsibility for all of us to keep all of these statistics and this alarming research in mind, to think twice about everything that we are seeing in the chat right now, is considering how we are building these algorithms, keeping this bias and ethics in mind, to make sure that the economic inequalities are actually met. So for women, it'll be easier.
Sure, sure. Mansa, very well, right? Because the representation of women in a new innovation needs to happen. And when you look at the history, usually women come in like 10 years after the innovation is done. There is a lag in when we adopt it. But for the AI, I would ask all of us who are listening today really to make it as a social responsibility project to learn about AI, get familiar, have a representation of your voice wherever you are, to make sure that we are actually not eliminating those. We have to eliminate those jobs because those are repetitive, but how can you automate those jobs so the women can easily upskill into those opportunities? And one of the things I also learned was around the policy and governance was it needs to start with leaders rather than trying to tell the developers or try to tell the designers. So Mansa, what is your take on what policies and governance we should be considering when creating the bias-free data model for AI solutions? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chai. So, and being in the data space, when we actually articulate, bias-free AI models, one thing we all need to understand that machines do not have any emotions, right? So machines are objective in nature. So, but what we need to articulate is, where do these machines get this bias from? And how to avoid this kind of a question. So that is the primary aspect of what we have to be articulating. So bias can develop in many ways. For example, it could be a data driven bias. So because machine is obviously it is garbage in and garbage out. So machines look for patterns within the data spectrum. It could be interactive bias, where the machines actually get from emergent bias. For example, a lot of us are users of social networking websites, and we do not see always all the updates what our network posts, but we only get the information that we mostly likely want to see. So in a lot of cases, we may never see the things that we never know about also. So the machine is actually, some mathematical equation is actually deciding what we need to actually see. Similarity bias, a lot of elections or country political issues are dealt with this algorithms, where it only shows us the content that we mostly agree with. So before rushing into implementing any AI or any models, Chai, to your point, we need regulations. We need policymakers to ensure that the foundations are in place from the outset itself. And there are 4 aspects that I would actually suggest that anybody could keep in mind, is to look at data privacy, look at bias detection methodologies, like look at fairness assessments in the models as well. Having the explainability for the models, where why a particular model took this particular decision, having that explanation in place would be very helpful. And governance is a critical element. That's the fourth element, is what data is in the model based upon, and having that entire data lineage to support human oversight. So policymakers should have to keep all of these 4 aspects in mind. So that will help us, to make the models for the AI solutions have that governance decisions better made.
Well said. I think the regulations are so crucial, and I think the policymakers should be looking into it. And Mansa, as you were talking through it, like you kind of talked about very those four areas, which is the data privacy, bias detection, explanation around the decision making, and the governance around how these models are created. Very well said. So each one of you, when you're listening, you have a little bit more tangible to look at the policy making rather than looking at complaining about, oh, there's a bias in the code. We can actually go and influence how the code needs to look like. So with that, Matt, I would love you, because you're leading a lot of those work. Can AI aid policy making? Now that we know we have to do a lot of policy making, can we use AI to do the policy making? And if yes, how should we be thinking and designing and implementing these policies through AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start by saying I don't think any of us want AI to be defining policies for us, right? It's really, in the best sense, it should be helping us become informed, drive insights that we wouldn't necessarily have without that AI technology, so that we as humans can make better informed policy. I think the best way to do this is to tell a story of a project we did a few years ago with the CDC, focused on non-communicable diseases in the city of Boston. So they were looking at things like asthma and trying to understand, what are the trends, what are the correlations? And so we built a model that correlated a bunch of different data sources. And you can imagine it. So there's health data, publicly available health data, but traffic data, right? Socioeconomic data, parks and recreations data, education data, to build a model that would tell us, what are the correlations between things that might initially seem unrelated, but that are driving, higher levels of asthma in the city, especially with kind of underserved populations. And so the stuff that we discovered, it's anecdotally, it makes sense, but the closer that people live to a highway, the higher levels of asthma. The further they were from a park, the higher levels of asthma. Lower, economic access and access to schools, the higher levels of asthma. And so, when you're defining that policy, this is with the Boston Public Health Commission, the easy way to do it is say, hey, these neighborhoods have higher levels of asthma. Let's address it. Let's get kids treated in the schools. You're treating the symptoms. But by understanding that data and creating those advanced models, and also being able to run simulations and hypothetical, if we change this, what's the impact, versus if we change that, what's the impact, you can start to look at, putting a park in a certain neighborhood, may cause a better long-term impact, than dealing with, treating asthma symptoms within that same neighborhood. Thinking about public transportation and getting people off the roadways might actually have a better health impact, or drive better health outcomes for those communities than treating the end sore or the end symptoms that come out of it. And so as you're defining these policies, I think there's a lot of creative ways that you can think about, especially the sustainability goals, and leverage AI to build really advanced models that will help you drive policy in the right direction, so we can make the most effective investment to drive the best outcome.
Thank you, Matt. So what we at least learned is we do not want the AI to do policy making, but we should be pulling all the data in an advanced model so that we can actually make policy making. So that we all are very, very clear. So Priyansha, let's talk about ethical challenges and barriers. What are you seeing in the world, and what do you foresee with the widespread of adoption of AI for solution building? And the reason why I'm asking you this is we have a lot of VCs and private equity funds really investing multi-million dollars of money into these companies which are building AI solution. What should we be looking at, and what kind of things we should be evaluating and stressing upon to address these barriers and challenges?
Yeah. Great question, Chai, again. So yeah, I mean, rapid development of artificial intelligence, as we all see, holds great promise. But then it also comes with a potential of, a lot of pitfalls. So let's talk about, let's look at both sides of the coin and see, how we can really get rid of the biases and the ethical way of going about AI. So, while some agreements have emerged concerning cybercrime, interpretation of AI warfare remains outside any binding legal obligation at this point of time. In the absence of a consensus on AI norms, every business model and business is at risk posed by issues of what we all highlighted before as privacy, transparency, safety, control, and biases. Beyond the Murphy definitions and lack of common consensus, the issue is not only in the algorithms themselves, it's actually in the data used to train them, which Matt also highlighted in his talk. So now, like, it's AI systems learn to make decisions based on training and coding data, which can be tainted by human biases or reflect historical or social inequalities. Similarly, the data used to train AI systems relies on population sampling. While we would like to assume that the training data used always represents society as a whole, results have proved that this is not always the case. Biased data causes machine learning to rely on unjustified bias to discriminate against groups at scale. AI technologies already in the market are displaying these intentional and unintentional biases. For example, like, we one example on biases which we have seen is, talent search technology that intentionally groups candidates based on demographic characteristics, or some kind of insensitive autofill search algorithms. So that the one way I think where we can bring a change would be having more and more women, like, representation in, even in identifying the data part of things, because then that we will discriminate the biases that happens in the data. So for the first step towards having a good AI model starts with having good data. So yeah, that is something that I think every company should focus on when they start towards their AI journey.
Sure, and all of you actually, brought together the three R's for as we approach AI. The first one was representation. So we all have to represent. We need to have a voice, and being the technologist, or whether you're getting into the tech industry, you still need to have a representation, because you can represent an industry that is not really integrated with the tech ecosystem. Second is regulation, looking at the regulations from the perspective of data privacy, bias detection, explanation of the decision, and governance. Those are very important. And third is social responsibility. It's our responsibility to make sure the world is kept safe, and it is creating access for all of us, so we do not have a huge digital divide that's going to happen. Now, coming to that is the automation piece. And Matt, I want to start with you, because a lot of corporations are going into massive automation with AI. As you're thinking about the AI, and when you're having those conversations, what is the hardest thing that you're seeing about automating with AI today? Is it talent issues? Is it use case scenario? What are you seeing today?
Yeah, I actually think it's an expectation issue, is that organizations think that, automating something is a single point in time. We're going to understand this process, and we're going to automate it, and we're going to deploy it, and then, hey, we're good, right? It's a very iterative process. Anytime you automate a process, you impact the people that were previously participating in that process, the organization, right? The output of the organization as well. And so I think you've always got to be iterating. So you introduce an automation, or you introduce a workflow, and then you have to reanalyze what was the effect, both the intended and unintended consequences of that automation. I think stories are the best way to tell this. We worked with an organization that really does distribution, like warehouse distribution, and they had a social mission to employ more people with either physical or mental disabilities or handicaps. And so they wanted to, they were doing a lot of inventory checking, right? They wanted to automate that by using computer vision to be able to go and detect inventory levels, basically doing counting of products in warehouses. And so we built this system for them. It worked great out of the box. Increased productivity, right? And then they had a decision to make, right? They could lay off a whole bunch of people because their existing employees were more productive, or they could open up more business, right? They could take on more clients. They could push more products through their warehouses. Obviously, they chose the latter, both for the benefits to the company itself and the P&L and the bottom line, but also the human impact. So I think it's just that so many organizations and people think that you write a script, you automate the workflow, and you're done. But it's a continuous process to automate and tweak and create opportunities, based on the improvements that you see.
So well said. And that's exactly right. With the corporation, it takes years to get to a model that can become really powerful or can become evil. So it's just a process that they have to go through. But if we train everybody with the right intention to keep the planet safe and sustainable, I think we will achieve the goal. So we have first question came in from our ecosystem, from our network, is where do you see the human based problem analyzing the power of design fitting with peeling and addressing the problems with AI? Who wants to take that? Go ahead, Priyansha.
Um, so just give me one second. I'm just gathering my thoughts on this. If somebody wants to start, I just need 1 second. Just putting it
Sure.
in.
So where do we see the power-based problem, analyzing the power of design, fitting with peeling and addressing the problem of AI? And Chetan, fantastic question, right? Because we have to think about it, because this is a very new frontier that we are going after. But as we think about the design piece, I think it's really consciously making sure that when we are creating AI solution, one is to look from a SDG goal perspective, is what are we trying to solve? How can we add societal impact rather than create challenges for the this goals not going down, but it's really increasing incrementally. So that would be my first area from a design concepting thing, is to really align to the UN SDG goals, because it gives like a North Star for most of the companies to accomplish the goal they are trying to reach. Is anyone else want to add to this particular discussion?
I think one more thing that can, that comes to my mind when we talk about design is a good visualization of how the data looks like. Because, the design, I mean, the perspective comes when you have a good idea of what your data is really like, emphasizing on. Because one thing that even Matt mentioned while he was talking about the use cases, that they were different data sets, right? Like they were, but then it's all about, when you try to, I mean, it's very understood. Like when you look at things and you're like, this is the obvious answer, but it really doesn't work like that. It's more about having a great visualization of how your data set looks like, and then basically going about like, designing the model. So there should be and that itself is the basis of having a good ethical, like, bias free AI model too. So transparency on the data set, right, having a good visualization of data set is something I would say has a really important impact on the design part of AI models.
So well said. So for the interest of time, the my team is already saying that I only have a couple of minutes. Before we go into a final round, what I would like to ask all the attendees, what were your takeaways? What did you learn? What is your responsibility? Go ahead and put it in the chat, because we want to make sure that you are engaging, you are taking the responsibility to have your representation done to make sure the AI solutions are great. So go ahead and put in your takeaways or what you are going to do as your responsibility, so we can really make a difference on the planet. So with that, final round for both of you, all of you, is there any final words of wisdom for this community? And how can we start influencing and impacting our ecosystem? Mansa, I'll start with you. You're on mute.
Yes. So, a quick final thoughts. I think as we are looking at the four characteristics, as I mentioned, for an AI to be successful, and the policymakers and regulations and governance that's coming in place, a lot of industries, a lot of companies, while they're investing, I think one thing that they need to keep in mind when the developers or data scientists who are actually hands-on going to be developing these algorithms, so they have a good understanding of a vetted knowledge of all the biases, of all the governance that they need to keep in mind when they are designing these algorithms. So I think I would urge for all the companies, when they're hiring or when they're training, when they're actually asking a lot of teams to start building or designing these AI models, to keep the governance in mind, to keep the biases, to keep the data privacy or the governance elements in mind before they actually start building or designing these aspects.
Fantastic, Mansa. What about you, Priyansha?
I think for me, it's gonna be as a startup, as an entrepreneur. For me, it starts from like myself, and I would strive to continue building AI models. Avoiding conscious and unconscious biases. Well, while when I'm developing models, for any customer and also I would love to open access. I mean opportunities for my female fellow entrepreneurs out there. What WIC is doing here, I would love to support in every possible, way that I could, to really open doors for more and more female entrepreneurs to be a part of this AI ecosystem.
Thank you, Priyansha. Matt, what about you? Any final words of wisdom for our community?
Well, I think that a lot of companies, when you're actually thinking about deploying AI in the real world, decisions are being made based on P&Ls and shareholder value, right? And for better or for worse. And I think the thing I'd leave people with is, as a person who's been part of startups as well as large companies, shareholders value these sustainability goals as well, right? They value the bottom line, they value the P&L, and whether you're a startup or whether you're a big company, there's intrinsic value and there's also monetary value in trying to achieve these goals. So when you're thinking about AI, I think it's really important that we're not just thinking about, how do we reduce cost or how do we, improve the P&L. It's how are we, which of these goals are we committed to as an organization? Which do we align to? Which do we incorporate into our mission? And then how do we drive shareholder equity as well as, societal benefits, by committing to those goals and considering them when we're making decisions, not just about how we're going to eliminate some costs from our organization or maybe drive new features in our product, but how do we achieve and then promote these goals within the sustainability list.
So well said, so well said. And I think each one of us have a full responsibility. So here are the 3 R's for us as an ecosystem. And each of the speakers did a fantastic job helping us understand the breadth and the depth that we need to look into for the next 10 years, because it will take that many years to get to a place where we know that the AI is working on our behalf. Once that is done, quantum computing is right around the corner. So we need to get ready for that. So as you think about it, focus on representation. Make sure you are representing yourself in every place so that the category of jobs that's going to be eliminated, we can bring that back in a way through upskilling and getting the scholarship for education so women can easily transition into the new roles. Second is regulation, looking at the 4 ways that Mansa talked about. And I would say, please connect with her today so you can understand a little bit more about it. And then please take responsibility. Do not sit on the sideline. And we as Women in Cloud ecosystem have to become influential with the regulations to make sure that we can drive the change we want to see. So in the next year, we will be rolling out the Coalition for AI Ethics, and we will invite all of you to participate with us, and you will get to hear a little bit more today. With that, again, Mansa, Priyansha, Matt, fantastic insight and great perspectives, and thank you for educating our ecosystem so well. We really appreciate you doing this contribution to our community. With that, Patty, baton to you.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, that was so informative. And, I captured a lot of the takeaways in my map, but just keeping governance in mind, I wrote down a lot of these things about hiring and training and policies. But what the truth is that with AI, it's all about the data. This is what you kept talking about. The data has to be good, unbiased data. And so right at the front end, people have to understand, and we have to make sure that we have equity of people that are looking at sorting that data, then monitoring everything. Oh, that was just so incredible. Thank you so much, all of you.